Hi, Brendan. Tomas Saluda.
Hi,
I
Tomas.
was just wondering, you mentioned about both parents being very pro-Irish language
Sure.
and how, including some activity after school hours and things. Do we know anything about Louis' competency in the language?
Funny enough, no. The only thing I can see is that in the census, he's marked down as having Irish and English. You know, now that doesn't give any indication of a level of competency at all. But it does seem, from reading different accounts, that, you know, even more so than the two I showed on the screen there, that they were turning out pupils who were then going on to teach the Irish language in different parts of the country. So they seem to be fairly passionate about it and good teachers. So you would suspect that they would have handed it to their son Darcy. And maybe like other Republicans across the country, it was one of those things that, you know, that inspired him as a revolutionary, you know. But I can't say for sure any more than that, other than the census says he has both languages, you know.
Yeah, it's just that obviously Conra was very organised in Dublin before it became Conra Gaeilge, I mean, and you know that a lot of people actually came to Republican activity through their membership of Conra, including Pierce himself and others, you know. So I just wondered whether we had any record of anything like that.
No, but you know what? That is interesting. I mean, I don't have the connection between, you know, he arrives in Dublin and joins the Volunteers, how that came about. I know that some of those that were arrested with him in 1918, they were students in the city as well. So there seems to be a lot of students during the time. So maybe it was through a student activity, but just as likely if he was involved in the Volunteers or involved in the Gaelic League, Conor Gaeilge up in Dublin. And he, funnily enough, he wasn't too far distance from their head office either, you know, but I haven't come across his name as a member of any of the branches up there of Conor Gaeilge. So I can't say for sure, but you know, it could be a possibility that he had Irish, had an interest, joined the Volunteers through the Gaelic League up there as well, you know, but I can't say for sure.
All right, thanks, Brendan.
Hello, Brendan. Tom Joyce calling from Hedford.
How are you?
I'm good now. I just wondered there when you were talking, and congratulations on a lovely program, Brendan. And thank you for all the information.
Good, thank you.
I'm a long time involved with Louis Darcy history. I just wondered there. You said the original Darcy family home was in Clonkeely.
Yeah, do you know what? I can't say 100% for sure, but what I came across was I know from his marriage certs, his father's name was John. And I have a death record then of a John Darcy, who matches the same age range, who dies, and his son is present at the death, and the son is Nicholas Darcy. So Nicholas Darcy is such an unusual combination of names, you know, that I'd be fairly certain that that's who it was. So I do have his record. If you give me 1 second here, I should be able to say exactly when that was. Louis Darcy, family history. I don't actually have it saved, but I come across the death record of it, and the father's address at the time was Clonkeely, which is what led me to believe that that's where his father was from.
Yeah, I think that's probably accurate as well.
Okay, good.
The main reason I asked you that, I some 4 years ago, I'd say, in company with a lot of musical friends from the local area here, I sang that song at the same one that Matt Kane sings. I sang that song at the Headfest in Hedford, and it generated an awful lot of interest at the time, because obviously, you know, I gave as much information as I had at the time about the background to it, and a lot of people had never heard this, and there's been people, local people, who lived within the area but didn't know anything about it. But I wondered afterwards, you know, when I heard your version of things, I wondered, was Louis was actually born in Hedford? You think he was?
I'm certain. Yeah, his birth record says Hedford. Yeah. and as to the others. And then the 1901 census, at the time he would have been 3, and that's definitely the whole family living on the square in Headford is the address. So
Yes.
it looks like all the kids were born there, but attended school out, and then they moved out to Carrigan, is what it says in the 1911 census. But I have seen different addresses given all around that Clyde area, for them. So I don't know if that means they moved. I suspect, given that there was 2 teachers in the family, that if there was a teacher's house in the locality, they probably had it because the father was principal. So I suspect that they were in the one house the whole time. Because certainly for all Louis' young life, both his parents were teachers there, and then his mother remained a teacher for long after he passed away. So I suspect they lived in whatever teacher's house it was in the Clyde area,
And that's probably true too, because I do remember that you mentioned there that Louis was actually wearing a shirt and tie belonging to Bill Craven.
Yeah.
And Bill is a far out relation of my family.
Okay.
And when we used to go to visit Bill, I clearly remember the school building was standing at that time, and it was in good shape.
Yeah.
I think my parents used to say that there was a house there as well. And that's right beside where Louis is buried. It's right beside the burial ground in Carrigan. That's where the school was.
Okay.
And I also know where the original Darcy family home used to be, because my sister is married to the people who actually, I think they actually bought the Darcy holding of land or whatever. But that house, there's nothing left of that. Neither is there anything left of the school beside the graveyard. So your take on it is that Louis was actually born in Headford.
Yeah, I'm certain sure that he was born and lived in Headford, and they moved out then from Headford out to Clyde area when he was a boy. Sometime between, and I think even his sister was born. Irene was born. The last sister and the last sibling was born in 1902, and she's registered at Headford. So it must be sometime between 1902 and 1911. So that's a big window there, but in that kind of 9-year period, they moved from town out,
Yeah, because I was in touch with the McHugh family, the descendants of Willie McHugh, the man who wrote the song, songs. I meet them regularly, and after that, having sung the song at the Headfest in Headford, some of them came to me to find out more about it, because branch of that family, one of Willie McHugh's daughters was married in Donegal, and some of them came back. And one of them, Frances, is now back in Headford. She lives in Headford.
Yeah.
The other members of the McHugh family live around the area as well.
The McHugh family, Paul in particular, was very helpful when I was looking for. That's how I was able to get the photograph of Willie McHugh and the handwritten lyrics, which is nice to have the handwritten lyrics by Willie's daughter, Frances. So that's where I was able to get that. Because, as I said, the song is sometimes that song you will see attributed to John Heenan, the Willie McHugh version. So they're often mistaken. Even in some really good books, I've seen them mistaken. But I'm fairly certain that I have it right, that the 2 different versions attributed to the right men,
Yeah, well, I'm sure you have, because I actually sat with Willie McHugh years and years ago. I sat with him one Sunday night when the roads were too slippery to go anywhere. And my brother and a friend of ours, John Tierney, and myself, we went to visit Willie, because we'd heard, since we were kids, my father used to sing that song. And we heard about it, and we thought, well, while there's still time, we'll go and meet the man who wrote the song. Brilliant. So we went to visit him one Sunday night, and we sat with him for about 3.5 or 4 hours, and a most interesting man. An absolutely lovely evening with him, and it was a pleasure to have done that, and it's all the more important now, when the history is coming more and more to light, to have the facts right and accurate.
And do you know what's interesting as well? If you read the lyrics of both songs, actually capture quite a bit of Louis Darfy's life story in more detail than you'll find in any history book, about his, being in Dublin and being arrested, about him coming back, about his capture. So there's quite a bit of good information within the lines of those songs, which would tell you that they were very familiar with the story, both men. And, and obviously, I would say, as I mentioned in the talk as well, there's not 10 kilometers between Ballycasey and Clyde, and both men were involved in the Republican movements. They were bound to have known each other, or if they weren't on friendly terms, they would certainly know each other to see, so he's probably very affected by the death,
Of course, they knew each other. They had to, because the distance between them wasn't that great. Transport and everything was more difficult in those years, but they seemed to be able to get over that hump. But while we talked to Willie McHugh that night, he never ever mentioned that he was captain of the Kuna branch of the IRA. That's something he never. But then he, knowing Willie and the kind of man he was, quiet, unassuming person, and he answered our questions, and he wouldn't overly elaborate on any of the the immediate details that attached to them. But as having met him and having had conversations with him, he actually sang that song for us that night.
Brilliant.
And as I said, it's a lovely memory to have. And
great piece of history to have witnessed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as I said, I only got to know the rest of the family then, Paula and the other girls. I only got to know them later on in life, a lot later on in life, because I'd heard since I was very young. I used to hear my dad, obviously. I used to hear him sing the Louis Darcy song. But as in public performances, Matt Cain was about the only one who was doing that. There was nobody else singing that out in public, let's say, at a pub session or anything like that. He was the only one. And he kept it alive for all those years when nobody else was doing it.
I was in touch with a man from Sligo. He's a singer and fiddle player, Philip Doddy.
I know.
And
yeah.
He was, when he was in Galway, he had heard a guy by the name of John Folan, I think it was, from Castlegar singing it, and Philip picked it up from him. So it seems to be, performed in pockets here and there. But as I said, it's amazing that you have two ballads written about him, but trying to find any information on him was very, very difficult. Obviously, he passed away before he could leave a witness statement. You couldn't find out too much about the activities in the Headford Battalion. You couldn't really piece together the timeline when he was sent down from Dublin as an IRA organizer and when he became commandant of the battalion. Excuse me, very little detail on that. So you're kind of dealing with tiny snippets of information and trying to put together a narrative out of it, So there's lots of little snippets everywhere, but no one big story about him,
Yeah, well, one of the major difficulties he had when he came back from Dublin, Louis, was Matt Cain uses a line in one of the ballads that although he gained honour in a high-handed way, he was, I suppose, probably looked at as a bit, above the average, being in college in Dublin and this kind of. But he came into the Headford area, and the Headford area was known and reputed to be rotten with spies.
Okay.
And it was commonly reported, and in years gone by, when you get little snippets of information from old IRA people. My dad was in the IRA and my uncle was in the IRA, and you'd be getting little snippets of information about why Darcy was captured. I mean, how the hell did they know that they just walked in on him as he boarded a train from Oranmore? They had to have pinpoint information to be able to do that.
Yeah, it seems they did, and it was hinted that when they raided his house, they had information in that biography of Ormond Winter, and that they were acting information as well when they arrested him in Oranmore, and that spied him. And as I said, he seemed to be a very wanted man. They knew it in Headford. The police were constantly looking for him. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he was captured. But he had a rough winter before on the run. Out there, having food brought to him, you know, even thinking about living, you know, and I'm sure it's the same for both sides. I don't want to be taking one side over the other. When you talk about things like this, I'm sure it was difficult for RIC men and Crown Forces, constantly in fear of being picked off from the ditch. But equally, it was, you know, a difficult life for men like Louis Darcy, constantly in fear of being informed on or being picked up or being found by Crown Forces, and there's no guarantee of arrest, you know, torture and maybe you know, a quick bullet in the head might be what lay ahead of you. You know, so it must have been tough for both sides throughout it, you know. But he certainly spent a tough winter before he was captured.
A lot of them did, because I know my dad being one of them, and there was another family. There were a family of Murphys that lived only about 500 meters from my original family home, where my dad lived all his life. And there was a boring coming through on some of our land at the back of our house, and Hubert Collins came by that boring on horseback one day, and it was around about midday when he was passing by. He had come from the forge, having been in to get his horse shod or something, and he was passing by, and my uncle and my dad, they were out in the fields doing something, and he said, "Lads, you better gather up." He says, "The tans are in Hetford, so you better get out of here." So they had to just leave whatever they were doing, and they had I'd say it was about a quarter of a mile across the fields into land that wasn't too far away from the riverbank, and they had their hideout made from just ordinary dry stone walls, and they had inside in the hideout they had matting made from straw, like plaited straw. That was where they slept, and that was the insulation they had in the place. But they were there. They used that. I think Dad used to say they used that for almost a year. And a lot of the time they couldn't come home at night because they never knew when these tans were going to come around the place. So they basically lived there, and they'd sneak back to the farm in the daytime where they could do some work, whatever the work they could do. And Hubert Collins told the lads that day to go and hide. And about 2 hours later, the tans shot Hubert Collins.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was the same evening. That was the evening after Kilroe ambush.
It was the evening after, I think.
Yeah.
Or it could be the day of the ambush. I wouldn't be sure about that.
I think it was. I think the ambush took place early in the morning, and Hubert was shot that afternoon. Yeah. And I had read actually about that he was coming back from the forge. Interesting to add that story that he'd given a warning to the lads working in the fields on his way back. But yeah, that'd be right. That'd be the timeline for it. All right.
Yeah. Brendan, I'm sure there's other people that want to talk to you now, and I've taken up a lot of your time. But
thanks a million for that.
And hopefully sometime. Will you be doing this again sometime, or
if I'm invited, I will.
Well, I know I'm only saying the obvious. I'd love to hear it again.
Well, as I said, everyone is welcome when we get open and a bit of normality back, and we can have big numbers back in the museum again. As I said, I'd be more than happy to bring people around and show off some of the objects we have in the museum that relate to this period, you know.
That would be lovely. It would be really interesting. Thanks,
Brendan.
Thank you, Brendan.
You're welcome.
Brendan, I just wanted to ask you, where could I get a recording of that song?
You know what? I bought a copy of that recording recently for tonight, and I got it from the Gaelin website, so they have copies of it available. So they reissued the CD. Well, it wasn't. It must have been on cassette tape back in 1985, but they reissued it in 2017. So 5 years ago, 4 years ago. Getting confused with the years. So you can still get copies of it. I picked up a copy for €15 and had it delivered out to the house. Because I couldn't come across it anywhere online, and it's not on Spotify, and it's not on YouTube or anywhere else. So I bought a copy. So you'd be able to get it from the Gaelin website.
Gaelin.
Yeah, Gaelin. Yeah.
Gaelin. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I suppose a lot of your viewers there tonight wouldn't know they would know the Ford family in question, Mary Ford's family. Gus and PJ are the present relations, or were the present relations. That'd be Michael Ford's dad and Pat Ford's dad in Race Park. But you were talking about it being hard to get snippets of information. I had a lot of relations involved in the IRA struggle. Tom McGuire's son is married to a first cousin of mine, and my aunt was married to Vincent Corcoran. Neither of them would talk. My uncle was involved as well, and my dad would never mention any of the events of that time. So you're dead right. It was extremely difficult to get any information from anybody who was involved or who was present at the time.
And what's even more difficult is some of the information I mentioned out there is incorrect. There was one of the witness statements, the Bureau of Military History, and often these things are taken as, absolute fact. But this guy said, number one, that he was a medical student in the Royal College of Surgeons, and number two, that his family kicked him out when they heard of his Republican activities. Which obviously couldn't be the case, because by the time he was involved in the Republican movement, his father had passed away, and his mother was clearly supportive, as she was helping him throughout the War of Independence, and she had the same tricolor laid over her coffin when she passed away. But if you were to write your story of Louis Darcy and include that, you would have you'd have him down as a medical student, and you'd have him kicked out by his family for his Republican activities, So you've got to be very, very careful with the information that is even out there, But apart from that, as I said, it took a lot of trawling through pension records just to get one little line here, there, and everywhere to get the story. But it's been worthwhile, because, you do get a sense of a timeline and what he was doing, and how committed he was. I read somewhere else, actually, in another book. It was the school book, the anniversary of Clyde National School. Or another book by the same author, a man by the name of, I think it's Carroll, his surname is, and he writes that, when Darcy would turn up at a dance in the locality, they would have to clear him out for fear that he'd bring unwanted attention to the dance, So there were other little snippets in there as well of information about him which were interesting, but he seemed to be a fairly serious figure and a fairly fearless figure. And certainly that's how Tom McGuire described him, as well as a very, very committed Republican.
Yeah.
Brendan, did you, speak to any of the Heenahans when you were doing your research?
I was in touch with Carmel and John, and Carmel was very helpful when I was doing it, and provided some good information as well. And I think Carmel said that Carmel said that she heard through the family as well that he studied law in Trinity. So that kind of supports the idea that he was a medical student as well. And the fact that it says it in the record at the time, it's just a matter of kind of confirming that now as well. So yeah, they were very helpful. So I kind of put the call out there to see who had any information. And it was great even to be able to send a photograph, a school photograph, off to different family members, not tell them who I suspected was young Darcy, and to see if they could identify any kind of family traits or features in the young man, in any of the young men, to see who it was. And that actually Bill Craven, who we mentioned as well, is in that photograph. Louis' friend, he's in that photograph. He's the only other one I know in it, apart from Louis and his father.
Brendan, Tom Joyce back again.
How are you?
You were talking about recordings of the Louis Darcy song. I have recordings of that song, recordings that were made of the version that we did at the Headford Headfest. And if anybody wants them anytime, if they want to get in touch with me, I see you had Tom Craddock on there a minute ago. Tom is a neighbour of mine. So if anybody wants it, and the recording, it was a live recording that was done at a concert in Campbell Savern, but it came out reasonably well, and it is the version that I got from William McHugh.
Well, certainly, Tom, I'd love a version of it anyway. I'd love to hear that.
Well,
I definitely would too.
You're more than welcome. I'm hearing a lady's voice there. I'm not sure who it is.
Geraldine Monaghan. I'd love a copy of it as well.
Well, you're more than welcome to it, Geraldine.
Thank you.
There was something else.
I'd like one too, Tom, if possible, please.
Who have I now?
Mayor McGath.
Oh, yeah. You're only around the corner, Mary.
That's right, Tom. That's right.
That's no problem.
Thank you.
You mentioned Bill Craven. That Bill Craven is in that photograph, that school photograph. Did you say that, Brendan?
I did, yeah. Yeah, he's in the photograph, yeah.
I'll have to go looking closely at that now to see if I can figure out which one he is.
You know, I might even remember.
Yeah, I have it here, Brendan, but I'm not sure.
I do you know what? I'll send that on if I can get it. If I can get contact details for you, Tom. I'll send that on to you. I'll tell you which one it is. I do have it written down, noted in it, which it is, which boy he is. I think he's probably in the back row, because they're all the older boys are in that row. I think he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Fifth from the left, I think, is Bill.
Fifth from the left, back row.
2, 3, 4, 5. I think he's fifth from the left in the back row. I think that's Bill. I think that's Bill, but I can certainly confirm that. But I'm fairly sure that's him.
Here. Yeah, I'm sure I wouldn't be able to distinguish any or to figure out any resemblance there. But you know, I only knew Bill as an adult.
Yeah.
He was the man who played the first live instrument I ever saw being played. Bill was a lovely fiddle player.
Right. Okay.
And he was and I'd say I was probably 5, maybe 6 years of age at the time.
Yeah.
Because my mum and dad used to take us back to Bill's. He lived in the middle of Clydesdale Wood, and it was a great place for hazelnuts. And we didn't have much of those around where we lived, so we used to look forward to going back to Bill, and he'd have a full basin of hazelnuts freshly picked when we'd go back, and we'd just stuff ourselves with them.
Brilliant.
But Bill had a brother. I think his name was Sean. I think Sean emigrated to America.
That's right. Did he have a sister out there as well?
Yeah, he had sis.
And I think she gave. There was the American inquiry into conditions in Ireland during the War of Independence, and I think she. And this is from Tim Collins as well. Tim was very good when I was doing the research as well, very helpful. And I think she was one of the witnesses to the American Commission on Conditions in Ireland. His sister, Bill's sister.
Her name was Annie, not Sis. The lady who.
I'm pretty sure that's right. That she gave evidence. And
she was married to one of the Cunans of Kilcona, and I think it was her husband's brother, Frank Cunan, who was shot.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. One of the two.
Yes. Yeah. Was that the same family, Tom?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was married. I actually met her a couple of times. She came home on holidays, but her husband never did. I don't know. Her husband had died before she ever came home, I think. Mm-hmm. But that's the Craven connection, and they were also related to the Geraghty family, who live. Some of whom live in Hertford, still live in Hertford. And I don't know if you knew him, Brendan. Tom Geraghty used to do a show on Galway Bay FM.
Oh yes.
Well, he's a relation of the Cravens as well.
Right. Okay.
So I think actually Tom's mother could have been one of the Cravens. I'm not sure of that connection now, but there's a strong family connection there.
Yeah.
Good evening from Cornwall. My name is Martina Geraghty. I just thought I'd jump in because Kate Craven was my grandmother, and that was Tom's mother.
There you go.
I'm sorry, could you give us that again?
Oh yeah, probably not because I'm on the phone. It's Martina Geraghty here. So Tom's daughter, and his mother was Kate Craven from the Craven family in Clydesdale.
She was Bill's sister.
Yeah, that's right. So Kate was my grandmother. And I remember Bill well when I was young. He used to have a horse as well, if I remember rightly.
Who's that, Bill?
Yeah.
Yes, he did.
And I saw the fiddle And I knew he was a fiddle player, but it was great hearing your story about how good a fiddle player he was, because there's stories, bits of it, information like that I just don't have.
I have that fiddle, Martina.
Oh, have you? I did see a fiddle at home, and I was told it belonged to Bill. So he might have had more than one. I have no idea.
I tell you how I came to have that. I think your dad, Tom, the house in Clyde was a thatched house.
That's right. I remember that.
Obviously, the roof fell in on it for lack of attention over the years. And I was asking your dad one time about the fiddle, where had the fiddle gone to? And he said, Louis Burke in Headford has the fiddle. Now they both, obviously your dad, God rest him, and Louis both passed on. And
yeah.
I got in touch with Bernadette Burke, Bernadette being Louis' daughter.
Oh yeah, Bernie, yeah.
And I asked her about the fiddle and, you know, if she had any great attachment to it. And she said, well, no, she said it should belong in some branch of the family if it was possible to do that. And I said, could I have the fiddle? And she said, of course you can, and welcome. All I want to do is see the thing restored, because it's in bits. And I haven't found, well, I have actually found somebody now to work on the fiddle, because it needs a lot of restoration. But as hopefully, I promised Bernie as soon as I get the fiddle up and running that I'll take it back to her and let her see it.
Fabulous. It's a fabulous story, Tom. Good luck with that.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it restored, because, as I said, it's the first live instrument that I ever saw played.
Wow. Yeah, I heard you saying that earlier about him being, and it must have been amazing to hear him, because I mean, I've just got fragment memories of him, because I was quite young when I used to go out to visit those relations in Clyde, and when they started dying off. And I know Bill's grave is near Louis in Carrigan Cemetery as well, because myself and Dad used to go around the cemetery having a look at the graveyards as well.
Yeah. As I said, I'm looking forward to having it restored now, because, you know, just for the historical aspect of it, and, you know, the attachment I have, because it was the first one I ever saw played. Because Bill used to go to the Murphy's pub at the ferry.
Oh yeah, I know it. Yeah.
That used to be the Sunday night session house when Bill was young, and when he started to play the fiddle. And there was a man from I'm not sure I can get the name of it right. I think he was from Lagawanya, and there was a man called Mike Ford. And Mike used to play the accordion, and himself and Bill used to play in Murphy's on Sunday nights. So that's, and he learned to play. Bill learned to play the fiddle from some man who, I think he was probably just a farm labourer or something in Clyde House, and he used to be living in Clyde House, and Bill took lessons from him to start him off playing the fiddle.
Oh, very good. That's amazing. That's amazing bit of history, family history for me as well.
That's during that time during which Bill learned to play the fiddle. I think the Stanton family, I think, they were the occupiers of Clyde House at the time.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm kind of vaguely remember their names from the family history thing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for that, Tom. That's really interesting. It brings some of the relatives more alive.
It's good. What part of Cornwall are you in?
I am from kind of Hale, about 10 miles from Penzance.
10 miles from, oh, you're on the north of
on the north coast, yeah, just right beside the north coast, where the G7 summit's going to be in June. Be crowded. I don't know if you've heard about that on the news.
I didn't actually, no.
Probably more news over here than it is over there.
I know the southern tip, the southern side of the peninsula better than that, like Truro and what's the next one? The Lizard.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I'm not too far from, about half an hour from Truro, south of Truro, and the Lizard isn't too far away either.
So that's it. Look, I seem to be hogging the show too much now.
Yeah, I'm talking too much as well. Somebody else needs to jump in. Thanks very much.
Just adding a little bit of spice to the occasion. Is that right, Brendan?
Sick of listening about Louis.
Sorry, Brendan, I might pop in there again, Tomas, so do that.
Sure.
Just in relation to the addresses of the house, I'd say whether it's listed as Clyde or listed as Cargill, the likelihood is that it's the same house.
Yeah. Do you know there was a third one as well, Tomas? I'm trying to see if my phone was here now. I'd find the name of the townland. It was the townland across from Carrigan as well. Has it got the word Carrow in it? I wouldn't be awfully familiar with the area. Just going to see if I can see it on townlands now. But I came across, so yeah, it could be Carrigan, might have been given as an overall area, but it might be in Clyde. But there was the third townland which kind of threw me as well. But as I said, you'd suspect that, you know, with the father being principal and both parents being teachers, they would have the teachers' residence.
The res is this college, yeah. But
You know?
you find a pattern in actually where you have the local big house, whether it's Clyde House, even though Clyde School isn't in Clyde, it would still be described as Clyde National School. You have the same thing in Castle Hackett. As far as I know, that's in the townland of Bigger. And you have another one down near Hollymount that I just know off the top of my head. It's called Lahinch National School, but it's not in the townland of Lahinch.
Right, okay.
You see that repeated where the local landlord or might have some involvement in providing a site, but usually insisted that it was called after the actual house. So if the big house was Clyde, then the school would be called Clyde School, just so that people are aware of the connection.
Sure, yeah, and that makes sense, doesn't it? Because it is in Carrigan, but it's called Clyde. I think they live in. Is it Ballinacrega? Is that the name of a townland next to it as well?
Tom Craddock or Tom Joyce now would have better idea.
Tom Craddock, it's not ringing a bell for Tom Craddock anyway.
Or there's another one, Lugawanya.
Lugawanya, yeah, that's ringing a bell.
I think they lived there for a while. That was marked down as an address for a period as well. But at some stage when I get out there and things normalize a bit, I might try and find out exactly where that teacher's house was, in which they lived,
And if you wanted to see how close one townland was to the other, if you just Google Historical Maps Ireland.
Yeah.
And if you go into that site, there's the 6-inch color.
Yeah.
Actually gives you the individual townlands.
Brilliant.
And they're outlined in red.
Okay.
So you can see the overlap, we can see where one townland is near to another.
When I say stone's throw, I think I literally mean a stone's throw, from each other. I think these all townlands were neighbouring, almost touching onto each other, So there's no great distance between them. So, no matter where they were probably in the same residence or the same place, but it might be just given as a slightly different address, or it might have been on the borders between the two of them,
The townland that you mentioned there, Brendan, you mentioned Ballinacreg.
Yeah.
Ballinacreg is straight across the road from the graveyard.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not sure does anybody live there anymore. But Bill Craven used to tell me one time there was 13 houses, 12 or 13 houses in that village of Ballinacreg one time. And if you were travelling the road west from Hetford to get to Carrigan graveyard, you would pass Lagawanya on your right, about a half mile away from the graveyard.
Okay.
So
no great distance between them. I did actually go out during lockdown to visit the grave and take photographs when it was out there. So it was my first time really. Like when I'd head up home to Mayo, I'd always go home through Headford. So I'd know the road, but I'd never really gone down and ventured down off it. So it was nice to get down there and see the area, and visit the grave.
Yeah, and the school, you said you were talking about the school it was called Clyde School. It was always known as Clyde School.
Yeah.
Actually built in the townland of Carrigan, but Clyde would be kind of overall area, and it would be more denoted by the presence of the big house in the area.
As Tomas was saying there, yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, that if it was Clyde House, that if they had some, and they were benefactors of the school, so maybe that's why the name was attached to it rather than Carrigan,
I think the school was actually built by the Clyde House people.
That's right, yeah.
far as I know, they were the Stantons of the time, Brendan, were they?
That's right, yeah, yeah.
So they built, I think they built both the house and the school.
Okay.
As far as I know. And from what I can understand, I think the Darcys lived while the two teachers were alive. It was before the death of Nicholas Darcy. They lived in that house full time during that time. Now, whether Mrs. Darcy moved to Lagawanya after that, you said that there was some debate over whether she lived in Lagawanya or not.
I think she was in the teacher's house certainly during the War of Independence, because reading Carol's book, he mentions that it was in the teacher's house in the upstairs window is where she had the candle that she was using to indicate whether it was safe for Louis to enter the house or not, you know?
Yes.
And that for many years afterwards, there were burn marks on the window. So I don't know, maybe the house still exists for all I know. You know, but that seemed to be within the author's time, or within someone's memory. When the author was doing the research for his book, that was still known, you know.
That Carol man that you're talking about, he is from Lagawanya.
Okay, right, okay.
And I know he did write another book which I haven't. I don't know if he's written more than one, but he has.
Yeah.
I haven't read any of them.
One of them was the anniversary book of the school, I think, and I can't recall off the top of my head what the other book was entitled.
Well, it's something to do with the land of milk and honey or something.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Valley of the Milk, A History of the Carroll Family. That was in 2000. And then of Rarest Beauty, of Beauty Rarest, sorry, A History of Clyde National School in 2002. So Michael Henry Carroll. So he'd written those two books. And he had the lyrics for both those songs in there as well. But I think the John Heenan one was attributed to John Heenan, and Willie McHugh was not, Willie's song was unattributed in that book, you know?
Yeah, well, I'd say it couldn't have been easy for him to get the details around the Willie McHugh song. Like we were lucky in the fact that we knew about it as kids growing up, and what's the Carol man's first name?
Michael.
Michael. Well, Michael would be much younger than us now.
Yeah, okay.
He wouldn't be exposed to the kind of stuff that we were as we grew up.
Well, I was lucky when I was looking. I was trying to figure out, because, you know, I got in touch with. I chanced my arm and sent John Keane an email, and John came back to me and said he was going to check with Matt and check with yourself as well. And then they put me in contact with Paula, which was great to go back and get in touch with the family, and they were very, very, very helpful with information as well. And it's great to be able to collect the record, because Conor McNamara's book, which is excellent, the one on War and Revolution in Galway, the one I'm looking at here beside me, that in that book it was misattributed. So it was great to go back and make sure it's attributed to the right man, to Willie McHugh, you know.
Well, Brendan, how did you first start taking an interest in this?
Well, I suppose it's through the museum, and through, you know, as I said, we fully intended doing a series of lectures, and we'd have probably, in a way, farmed out all these lectures to other people, you know, and got them in to speak about it, other experts in it. But just I have more time on my hands than I would have in normal circumstances, you know, to do this research. So I've just spent the last 6 months, as these anniversaries are coming up. I've already moved on from the Louis Darcy story. I should have a piece in next week's kind of Tribune on a battle that took place in Connemara, probably the longest gun battle in the War of Independence. Took place in the home of Porrick O'Malley, the TD for Connemara, Galway, and that took place 100 years ago on the 23rd of this month. So they tried to raid his home. So that's another one. So it's just great for me. I'm just getting the opportunity as these anniversaries are coming up, and that story's finished now, and I'm already moving on to the next one again. So it's great. It allows me to get to build up my own knowledge in the War of Independence in Galway, to get to know places in Galway better than I've ever known. I went up last weekend to Porrick O'Malley, lived in a cave, a badger cave, in the mountains in a place called Glenglosh Valley, up in the Mom Turks. And it was a badger cave that they blasted and made wider and made it habitable for 2 people. And Porrick O'Malley, despite the fact that he was TD for Galway Connemara constituency, spent a significant amount of time living in this cave in the mountains. And I went looking for it last weekend, and it took me quite a while to find it, you know. So it's interesting. I'm getting to know the landscape. I'm getting to know the stories, and I'm getting, you know, as I said, there's no point me learning all this stuff and sticking it in a folder on the shelf. I'm very keen to kind of put it into the papers and to speak to people about it as well, rather than just waste my time with it, you know.
There's a man who lives somewhere around Hetford. I don't actually know exactly where he's living now, but he's from Slough in England. He's a man called Mick Buick. And since Mick came to live around Hetford, anytime we'd be having a music session in Campbell's Tavern just outside Hetford, Mick was the first man to come up and request the Louis Darcy song. An out English born rebel. Yeah, and I sent word that this podcast was to go out, and I hope that Mick is listening in. And if you are, Mick, hopefully we'll see you soon in a right setting.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Anybody else have any questions or would they like to add anything? If not, we might just call it a night and say sincere thank you again to Brendan for a fascinating talk on Louis, and to all the contributors tonight, Tom and Tomas, and all the other people who contributed as well. And a special thanks to Paul from the guru who organized all of the high-tech IT stuff. Thanks a million, and Irene and Claire. And hopefully we'll have one of those again before too long. And as Brendan says, hopefully we'll have a face-to-face one again.